here.
Yep.
All right.
And let me know if I'm talking too loudly or too softly.
Oh no, you're fine right now. That's
Okay.
absolutely perfect. Um, so before we get started, there's just a couple things. One is usually at the end. What I do is I like to just have the guest do a little intro that I can cut and paste into the beginning of the show.
Sure.
Just explain. Say who your name, bands you're associated with, if you like, and
Mm-hmm.
the name of the show is Performance Anxiety. So if you could just say, oh, I'm on performance anxiety or something to that effect.
Sure.
Uh,
Performance anxiety. That's I'm very familiar with that.
yeah. Well, we can talk about that if you like.
Yeah.
I had Trey Gunn on, and we spent like 20 minutes on that.
There you go.
So the other thing is, I just would like to know if there's any time constraints, if we have to wrap up by a certain time, or
No. None whatsoever.
great, great. All right. So the whole premise, excuse me, the whole premise of the show is that it's just the two of us talking like we were just kind of hanging out somewhere and just having a conversation. It's not
Sure.
a formal interview or anything.
Yeah,
So
no, that's fine. That's what I'm used to.
good, perfect. All right. So like I said, I really do thank you for coming on. I've been listening to Band of Susans forever,
That's
and
great.
yeah, and I've got. I don't have all of your solo work. I will be honest, but I do have a lot of it.
That's all right.
So I do have the new one, and I do have Distortion's Truth, and I've been dying. I hadn't gotten it, but I wanted to hear GilbertPossStenger. So
Yeah, that's a crazy thing. Yeah.
So we can talk a little bit about that. But first thing I want to find out about you is a little bit of your history. Like,
Sure.
how did you get started playing guitar? What age were you when you decided that?
Well, my first instrument was bass guitar.
Okay.
I had failed miserably at trying to learn how to play the piano, and also I was like the world's worst trumpet player. I was like in the junior high school band. I was like, third trumpet, fourth chair or
Oh,
something.
you
We
know,
mostly spent our time counting rests.
you're gonna make my daughter feel good because you're a professional musician and she plays the trumpet in the high school marching band and she loves it.
Yeah, well, I was absolutely terrible. So, when I was a teenager, I think I was 12 and a half. I was really in love. I was sort of in love with the look of electric guitars. I used to look at, the Beatles and see these. I didn't know what they were then, but they were Hofners and Gretches and Rickenbackers, and
Right.
I just thought they looked so cool. I actually thought an electric guitar was like you plugged it into the wall, and it was sort of like an electric knife. Like it would kind of like do something. I didn't understand that there were amplifiers.
Oh wow.
In any case, yeah. So my first instrument was like a Hofner copy Beetle bass,
Oh okay.
and I just picked bass because I thought it was really cool. I mean, this was not that much thought into this.
Okay.
I'd been noodling around on like an acoustic guitar that I was like, totally probably tuned in some kind of weird open tuning. And anyway, so I got this bass and I became obsessed with it. And I was spending like 2.5 to 3 hours a day up in my room, listening to the radio and trying to learn the songs. And I really wasn't good at sports and I didn't like sports. And so my parents, I think my parents thought that this was going to lead to a future of, fried foods and deviant behavior or something, which in fact it did, so they were right about that.
Parents know
So
best still.
so I was like, I was listening to, radio then, and so it was like the Beatles and the Stones and, the British invasion stuff. And, there was Motown and everything else, but I was more into sort of rock. And so I started playing in these little bands in junior high school and, doing Iron Butterfly covers
Oh
and,
boy.
all kinds of, stuff. And I was starting to listen to a lot of blues. So I was playing in these blues bands, sort of, I was totally obsessed with Albert King and the Paul Butterfield Blues Band and Mike Bloomfield and, and also
Okay.
some of the British guys that were, Eric Clapton and stuff, a little bit less. And so, yeah, so I was sort of into blues and blues rock, and I had a bunch of these different bands, through junior high school and high school. And um, actually, I went away to college, and after that, I got together with two of the guys that I had been playing with, and we formed this sort of punkish band called Tot Rocket,
Okay.
and that was in New Haven, Connecticut. We put a couple 7-inch records out. So that was my I'm a self-taught musician. I don't know half the time what notes I'm playing or what I'm doing. I like to tell people I'm like, like those blues players, like One String Sam, like, you know, I can do like these three things and that's all I want to do. And
Right.
that's not really true, but I sort of think of myself that way. I did go through a period where I was learning, Dwayne Allman solos and Eric Clapton solos and all that stuff. And
Oh wow.
I can still, and Albert King and Mike Bloomfield, and I can still actually play some of that stuff, but I don't because it doesn't really interest me. But I did go through a period where I was learning those solos off the records and stuff.
Oh man.
Yeah, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, and this was, in the late 60s, early 70s we're talking about. So, the music on the radio was pretty good. And there was
Oh yeah.
also what they used to call FM radio, which in those days was more almost the equivalent of college radio, but it was sort of DJs playing, they might play Captain Beefheart or something, something really out there.
Yeah, yeah. So, at what point during this process did you discover effects pedals and distortion?
I was pretty late to that. I'm sort of a late bloomer in a lot of respects. I mean, when I was playing, with these various rock bands, and I actually switched at some point from bass to lead guitar. Although I still love playing bass, but I ended up playing lead guitar and get, what was called lead guitar in those days.
Right.
But we were just using these small Fender amps just turned up loud. We didn't have any pedals. I remember when one guy got like a phase shift pedal and we thought it was just the weirdest thing in the world. I didn't start using pedals until really the 80s, and I think, my first, I had actually, I'm actually forgetting something. I did have this fantastic fuzz pedal in the late 70s. It was made by Olson Electronics. Olson was like a Radio Shack kind of company.
Oh, okay.
And, there was Lafayette, there was Olson, there was Radio Shack. And I had this fantastic fuzz pedal that I've only seen a few of them. And so I did, and that gave us sort of almost like a Satisfaction kind of fuzz sound, but
Oh, okay.
more sustainy. But I never really started using pedals too much until, I got a Tube Screamer and then I started playing Marshall amps. And I was like, with the band Tot Rocket, we were sort of a very Clash influenced sort of punkish band. And so there was some distortion there, but, and I always loved this sort of feedback. And I always sort of, I loved playing these amps loud enough that they would feedback and stuff.
Oh yeah.
But it was pretty haphazard. It was really the time that I really sort of discovered my own voice was after this band Tot Rocket and the second band, which was called Western Eyes, which is sort of an offshoot of that. And around 84, I just sort of was disaffected from the whole music scene and the music industry, having put out a couple records and, gotten some good reviews, but was never really trendy or that, successful.
Okay.
I just started from scratch. I had a couple digital delays, which were very new in those days, and a couple distortion pedals, and I sort of stumbled onto a sound that became my sound. And it was very simple. It was stacking certain distortion pedals, and it was just the sound itself, the distortion itself became an inspiration. And so I started, droning with these and doing these feedback things and these repetitive riffs. And I would have a little drum machine pattern, then I would like loop a drone, and then I would like loop a riff, and then I would play over those three elements. And that was the basis of the Band of Susan's sound, essentially.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I really enjoyed about Band of Susan's was that the drone and the distortion were as big of a focus on the songs as lyrics or a riff, and that's one of the things that drew me into the band in the first place.
Yeah, I was, and part of that, I was inspired by, there are two composers that really inspired me. Rhys Chatham, playing with Rhys Chatham for a number of years,
Right.
Although he used totally clean guitars and he had a very sort of, the music was written out and it was very orchestral, but he was able to do some things with some very simple parts. And then another composer who's a sort of a real serious music composer named Phil Niblock. I'd actually just performed with Phil Niblock last night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Anyways, Phil Niblock is a sort of a minimalist composer who just uses only drones, slightly detuned drones. He's also a fantastic filmmaker, and he makes music. It's sort of he's in the same tradition somewhat as like Lamont Young,
Okay.
sort of minimalist, sort of trance-inducing, drone composers. Um, he had really inspired me, because he was making music. He used to say, "My music has no melody, no harmony, and no rhythm," and he was proud of that,
Okay.
and no bullshit,
Right. Yeah.
So so I think being exposed to those two composers, I think gave me a bit of a kick, a bit of inspiration. But yeah, and the other thing is, there's this great period like in the Rolling Stones, like around Beggar's Banquet and Satanic Majesty as well. They'll just like throw on like a mellotron drone or a Chennai, which is a double reed instrument.
Okay.
And I love those moments of sort of it's like a pedal point. It's a drone that cuts across the whole chord progression.
Right. Right.
Um, and that was really inspirational. That was as inspirational as Rhys or Phil Diblock. And also, I was listening to some Indian music, and and also some of the there's certain blues players that basically are doing like one chord things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's certain sort of a blues tradition that's not like a 1-4-5 progression. It's actually just a one.
Okay.
There's some great Fred McDowell stuff that just goes along on one chord, and it's sort of an implied drone.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, that fascinated me. Yeah.
Well, and I've noticed it, Band of Susans, and I want to get into how they formed and all in a couple of minutes. But since we're on the topic of the Rolling Stones, you guys in Band of Susans did a few Rolling Stones covers, and to me, it was a really interesting choice. And at the time, I didn't realize that the Rolling Stones were a big influence on you. I guess covering them, I should have guessed that, I deduced that apparently. But you guys took something. A traditional classic rock song and covered it in a band that wasn't a traditional classic rock sounding band.
Yeah, and that was really intentional. I mean, there's a period of the Rolling Stones, really from like around 66 or 67 to around 70, or maybe as late as 72, that just I really fell in love with. Now I think of the Rolling Stones as they're probably among the top four Rolling Stones tribute bands in the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
But
do.
there was this, and also the lyrics and stuff are crap, and it's just. But there was this period, there was this period when they were really, I was totally obsessed with them. As a matter of fact, in 1970, a father of a friend of mine brought home this London Times article, and it was about Keith Richards, and it mentioned that he played a five-string open tuning, and I had never heard of this. And of course, in those days, no one else had either,
Right, right.
except like maybe Ry Cooder or someone like that. So I started playing this like five-string Keith Richards thing, and suddenly I could play those great pure Keith Richard chords like on Street Fighting Man and that kind of stuff.
Right, yeah.
So I was really obsessed with that, and actually, I still write in that tuning sometimes. There are a couple of Band of Susan songs in that tuning. There
No,
was a Tot Rocket song in that tuning. So yeah, there were an influence, but it's a very specific moment of their entire career that I was really drawn to.
now, speaking of your Tot Rocket in your early days, I read a quote, and I was hoping you could kind of shed a little light on it for me. And the quote is, Robert, you can go to graduate school anytime, but Johnny Rotten only comes around once.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very strange moment in my life. That was after Western Eyes. We were just putting out this record. Western Eyes was sort of a revamped version of Tot Rocket, but it was sort of remixed by a good friend, electronic music composer Nicholas Collins.
Okay.
And anyways, we had this 12-inch, and that was sort of our last big attempt to sort of do something bold. But so I decided, what do you do? Like, I had been to college and I was a serious student. And what do you do when you don't know what you want to do? Well, some people, if they can afford it or get student loans, well, you go to school, right?
Right.
So I applied and got into one school. And the school I applied to was the Columbia University School of Journalism, which was
Oh,
actually the premier journalism program in the country at the time.
yeah, yeah.
So I got some student loans, and my parents were going to help me a little bit. And so I had just started. It was, in like September of 1983 or 84, 83, I guess it would have been. And in the meantime, a friend of mine from the band was working at a rehearsal studio, and he said, Public Image is auditioning guitarists, and they haven't found anybody, and you, Robert, would be perfect. And the truth of the matter is that I very much had a style at that point somewhat reminiscent of Keith Levine
Okay.
and sort of minimal sort of stuff. So, anyways, to make a very long story short, and there's a whole web page about this, but I auditioned for Pill, and I got in. Johnny Lydon called me. Oh, Robert, we want you. We're going to be leaving for Japan or something. And I was
Wow.
like, so here I am, plucked from obscurity. I'm good. I'm in Pill. Like, yes, you're in the band, Robert. But I'm starting graduate school. And so I call my parents from like a phone booth. In those days, we had phone booths.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I put in the quarters or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Calling long distance to Buffalo, New York.
Yeah.
And I say, listen, Mom and Dad, remember journalism school? They go, yeah, isn't that great? You're finally doing something with your life. You're going to school. And I said, well, have you ever heard of a band called the Sex Pistols? And they're like, silence. And I
Yeah.
explained to them that, I have this opportunity to be in this, what was then a super cool band.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And my mother, I'll never forget it. She said, Robert, you can go to school anytime, but Johnny Rotten only comes around once, which was the sweetest thing that she could have possibly said.
Yeah.
Um, so anyways, I played in the band for a couple of weeks, and it was sort of clear that what they really wanted was the sounds that their prior guitarists, this was well after Keith Levine, but they wanted the sounds their touring guitarists had, and they didn't want to really rehearse me. Like, it was clear it would have been a steep learning curve for me to learn, like, all their material, because I only knew like 4 Pill songs.
Oh, gosh.
I mean, I aced the audition just by kind of like faking it, and by like, but I obviously had the right sound and the right, I knew what I was doing to a certain extent. So anyways, what happened is I sort of got unpilled. I was sort of said, well, Robert, it's not really working out. So they rehired their old guitarist
Oh,
that had left the band. The funny thing is that next tour was really panned by all the critics. And I ran into Martin Atkins, who was their drummer at the time, like at a wedding or something after the tour. I said, Martin, you should have taken me, and he was like, yeah, we should have.
yeah.
So that was, but the weird thing was like being in Pill. And I told my girlfriend, hey, I'm going on tour. And I was telling people, I'm in Pills. I was going to the record stores and like buying their records so I could learn the material. And it was like, I'm in Pill now. And they were like, yeah, sure, kid. But I was really in Pill
That's amazing.
for a couple of weeks. And then of course, grad school never seemed as appealing.
Oh,
I
guys,
would go,
no.
I would go up to Columbia, and I would be jealous of the guys I saw in the subway with guitar cases.
Oh,
I
gosh.
did graduate with honors. I did very well. And some of my professors. I had one evaluation from a professor who said, you should take that shoe polish out of your hair and become a writer. Like stop this punk stuff.
Oh, what do they know?
But what do they know? So, anyways, that was my brush with Public Image.
Oh, man.
Um,
You mentioned working with Rhys Chatham, and I wanted
yeah.
to find out a little bit more about that because I found out about Rhys through Band of Susans.
Yeah, some people did. A lot of people did actually with Guitar Trio.
Yeah, guitar trio.
We were like promoting and hyping Rhys before anybody else in the rock scene. But Rhys, a brilliant composer, and I was introduced to him, I think, by Nicholas Collins or maybe by Susan Stenger, probably Nicholas Collins. In the mid '80s, and I joined his guitar group, which was basically 6 guitars, bass, and drums, and we worked and worked and worked, and we refined this piece called Die Donnergötter, which is the German for the Thunder Gods.
Right.
And
Yes.
I played on that record, and we did a tour of Germany in '87, and that was coexisting to the time that I was also starting to find my own voice. Although I was at the opposite end of the spectrum, Rhys was all about purity, and I was all about like distortion and feedback and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Um, But so yeah, so that was really influential. And I met, Karen Hageloff, who ended up playing in Man of Susans, and I met this guy Evans, who actually is the leader of two bands that I currently play with, that are sort of art rock bands. So it was a really, and also Ben Neal, who's a primarily a trumpet player, but he was in the Rhys Chatham band, and it was in Bill Brovald. I mean, it was a great bunch of musicians. Some, most of whom, or I would say three-quarters of whom, I'm still in touch with after all these years.
That's fantastic. And you still play with Rhys occasionally, is that right?
Occasionally, yeah. Sometimes, I did something at the Metropolitan Museum. I participated in his big Lincoln Center 200 guitars extravaganza a number of years ago. And yeah, every once in a while he'll call me up and he has some project and he wants and invites me to participate, which is always fun.
Yeah. Now, how does something for 200 guitars work? I mean, I can imagine it's just without proper direction that would just be
well.
You know
what it is. Rhys has been doing this for a long time with multiple guitars, like especially in France. He lives in Paris, for 100 guitars and 200 guitars. And the way it works is it's actually a very clever. He solicits people to participate, and they sort of write in, and maybe he asks them some questions. Can you read music, or what have you done? Anyways, he assembles a bunch of people, and then they get together and rehearse, and things are broken down in sections. So they're like section leaders. So let's say there's, 10 or 8 different people that are sort of going over the score, each with, 20 musicians or something.
Okay.
And so, they sort of learn their parts with the section leader, and then it's sort of all put together for maybe one big massive rehearsal and then one big performance. But it is kind of insane.
Yeah.
I mean, I have trouble just getting 3 people together for a rehearsal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard enough to do that. So it's kind of, but Rhys has figured out a way to do this, and it does have to do with, and also he tells people, well, this takes months of preparation. He gives people tapes to listen to. He gives them a score.
Right.
People get their parts assigned. They sort of learn their part. And, it's a lot of repetition too. So and the parts are relatively simple melodic parts.
Yeah.
So it's not impossible, but it is administratively insane. You know what I mean? It's insane. It's like a nightmare.
I can't even imagine trying to organize the whole thing. And the thing that I always really liked about it is that it, like you're saying, it's orchestral. It's not just a whole bunch of noise.
No, it's very orchestral, and there is sort of parts are divided almost like when you almost have sopranos, altos, basses, baritones. I mean, it's divided, across the sort of sonic range, so everyone's not playing, the same 6 strings, or they're not, there's several guitars tuned in different ways. So there's sort of a multiplier effect. Although I have a feeling that the 200 guitars probably sounds less interesting than like 60 guitars.
Yeah.
Like I think at a certain point you get diminishing returns because you get so much cancellation, you get so much phase cancellation, and I don't know, things get a bit blurry, but it is quite a spectacle.
I would love to see one of those performances because I can only imagine how powerful that would be in person. I've only heard them.
There's probably some stuff on YouTube, maybe from France, and I don't know if it captured it or not, but there's probably some. If you look at, there's probably some stuff on YouTube of videos of some of the performances.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I would love to be there in person because
in person's the way, because and also in Lincoln Center we did it sort of in a square with the audience in the middle.
Oh my God!
So the audience was surrounded on all sides, or maybe it was just 3 sides, at least 3 sides, by these guitarists, and everyone has their own amp, so it's not just 200 guitars, it's 200 guitar amps, so that's an astonishing concept.
That's amazing. So how did you meet Susan Stenger?
Susan Stenger and I went to school together. We met as teenagers.
Oh, okay.
And, we were like best friends. We were boyfriend and girlfriend. We played in some bands together. I think we sort of mentored each other in some respects, although she probably taught me a lot more than I taught her. She introduced me to all this great sort of more avant-garde music that was happening in Buffalo. Stuff like, John Cage and David Tudor and Julius Eastman, Czech composer Peter Kotik, Fred Shevsky. There are all these, people. Susan was very immersed when she was a teenager into what was then called new music, which was really sort of serious avant-garde music. And she was trained as a classical flutist, and she studied in Prague for 2 years at the conservatory there.
Wow.
Super serious musician, but we also shared a lot of taste in music. We used to listen to Rolling Stones records together.
Oh, there you go.
So we had worked together in these like silly high school bands where you play at the high school cafeteria, and it's just sort of too embarrassing to even go through.
Right,
but
right.
but she was someone who I was very close to and remained close to, and when it came time to put this band together, which was sort of an outgrowth of, I did this solo cassette called Sometimes, which was sort of the transitional thing between my sort of punk bands and Band of Susans. And I said, why don't I have a band? And I said, but I wanted to be in a weird way sort of the Svengali, in that I wanted to get people that really hadn't played that much or even played at all. And I wanted to teach them sort of my weird guitar technique, very simple parts. So, and I had, it turned out that I had, 2 ex-girlfriends named Susan and the wife of my best friend named Susan. And so it was like, I had 3 women named Susan, and Ron, it was a great, fantastic drummer. Originally it was just drum machine, but I got my friend Ron involved. And so people said, they said, well, how's that Band of Susans going? And well, we're working, we're going to play. And so we never thought of a really super cool, marketable, trendy name.
Right.
Which I think was our downfall, because I think when people saw the name Band of Susans, they assumed that we were like the Bangles or something, that we were, or the Go-Go's, that we were. And so, of course, they were into a rude awakening when they went and saw us,
Yeah.
Because they were pinned to the wall with, loud guitars.
That would have been a great surprise for me. I would have loved that.
So, and I've remained, great friends and collaborating with Susan, up to this day. She lives in London and Ireland now, but, we could get together sometimes. We did a project in Portugal. We did something in London. We did something in Paris. She's very involved in music for film and also in sonic installations, and also stuff that sort of crosses over to the visual arts. And whenever there's a project that she thinks would be appropriate for me to participate in, she'll invite me, which is wonderful. So we still do stuff together, and plan to do more in the future.
Oh, that's good, because the chemistry that you two have is fantastic, and I love the music you guys have made together. And like I said, I haven't had a chance to listen to GilbertPossStenger. I don't know why I stumble over that every time I try to say
GilbertPossStenger. Yeah, it's funny because it's Bruce Gilbert, Robert Poss, and Susan Stenger. But the weird thing is that my father's name was Gilbert Poss.
Oh, really?
So it's very easy for me to say GilbertPossStenger, because it's like, yeah, that's a bizarre record. That was basically 2 performances, and it's very kind of experimental and kind of strange, and I don't listen to it much, but it was definitely a moment. I was very close with the guys in Wire for a time.
Okay.
And they came in New York. I played at their encore. We toured with Wire in '88 and remained good friends for a long time.
Yeah, you guys even did a Wire cover.
And we did a Wire cover, the song "Too Late" from Chairs Missing, on one of our Peel sessions. Yeah, no, that was great.
Now, did you guys also do something on? Was it one of the? Was it Wire that they cover or a tribute album? I think it's the song "Ahead."
Yeah, there's 2 different tribute albums, and there was one. Well, one was just versions of the song "Drill," and that we're on it uncredited. We're sort of like, it's like a pre-groove or something. I'm not sure what the correct term is, but like, at the very beginning before the record starts. Like,
you have to go to track 1 and rewind.
Exactly. But but we did do a really cool, I think the record is called Whore, if I'm not mistaken.
That's the one I'm thinking of.
And we did, yeah, that was really fun. And actually, the guys in Wired told us it was one of their favorite of the covers. So that was
Oh,
very nice.
that's awesome because there's some great bands on there, like My Bloody
I
Valentine
know.
too. It's
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was a really fun thing. That was a really fun thing.
a Band of Susans had some pretty interesting lineup changes too, and strange or unusual reasons why people left. So I guess when the first two Susans left, they were replaced with Karen Hagloff and
Yeah. And Paige Hamilton.
Yeah,
Later to be famous in the band Helmet. Yeah.
that.
Yeah. The funny thing is that, because I'd put this band together with friends and people that were, with the exception of Susan Stenger and Ron Spitzer, the other two people were, they had other lives. And, Susan Tallman was a serious, she worked in art galleries and was starting to write about art. Susan Lyle was a costume designer
Okay.
and starting to get successful in that area. And they weren't ready to like go on tours and that kind of stuff. So I recruited Karen from the Rhys Chatham band.
Right. Yes.
And then Paige, we got probably through an ad in the Village Voice.
Oh, really? Man, that place has produced some great bands.
Exactly. In the old days when you put advertisements in the newspaper,
Yeah.
what a concept.
Yeah, and you actually had to go and buy a physical newspaper and look.
Yeah,
through it.
and then and people would, you go to a rehearsal place, and we would audition tons of people, and there's a million guitarists in New York, but most of them were unwilling to play really concisely and precisely and simply. Everybody wanted to embellish. Everybody sort of wanted to make stuff, like sort of in their own style. And the reason Band of Susans, the music worked is because it was very precisely orchestrated, and the parts are very simple, but they're combined in very unusual ways. And so you had to play it like the right way,
Mm-hmm.
and most guitarists were not used to that. They would put their own sort of inflection onto it, or they would jazz it up a bit,
Yeah.
And so anyway, so this was always a problem. Yeah, there were different, the changes in the course of the personnel really had to do with the fact that you go on tour, you're not really making any money. Maybe you're breaking even, but like suddenly, let's say you're in a relationship and suddenly you're not making any money from your day job, but you still have rent to pay,
Right.
So it's hard to get people to take 10 weeks off to tour Europe and 10 weeks off to tour the US. So at different times, different individuals couldn't make it, or, just financially couldn't make it, or were too, involved with their families or their jobs and stuff.
Yeah.
And actually, the more successful we got, the more difficult it was, because we were touring more and more. We had some record label support, but still, nobody came home with any real money. It was just, it was really kind of, break even kind of thing. And, we just did it for the love of doing it. And, we sold some records, we sold some t-shirts, but it was, so that really was, and the thing is, when I would get someone new in the band, I would teach them the parts, or they would learn the parts off the tape. We didn't want like new blood in the band, as strange as that may seem. It was much more like the way Rhys Chatham worked, which is he's the composer, he writes the music, he recruits the musicians, they play his music. And that was basically the way it was for me and Susan, like, okay, we get a new guitarist, they're going to learn our music. So that is, that's the way it worked. And so it's a bit unusual than, a lot of other bands at the same period.
Well, and that kind of goes along. A lot of stuff about Band of Susans is unusual.
Yeah.
Paige Hamilton leaves and forms Helmet. Karen Hagloff leaves and goes to medical school and then becomes an oncologist.
Isn't that insane? Yeah. And she's doing so well now. And she's got some, as you know, she has records out of her own.
Yeah. I just had her on the show last week.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, I just saw the other day. Yeah, it's funny because I've known her since probably like 85 or something, or 84.
Wow, man.
And she's just doing great. And she's like really well-respected oncologist, and she's sort of restarted her music career. Yeah, that's incrediable. She's really an accomplished person.
Oh, very nice interview too. I'll just I'll say that now so that when people listen and they'll go back
and she's actually a productive member of society, unlike the rest of us, so that's really cool. Right?
Yeah, she's not doing a podcast or
whatever. Like doing sound for television, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So all right, so let's talk about that for a second. How did does that involve a lot of the electronic music that you do? And how did you get into electronic music?
Well, there's two different things. I mean, I was always interested in, even when I was at university, there was this composer, Alvin Lucier, there, and Nicholas Collins, who was an undergraduate, but it was like so precocious, he was like teaching electronic music courses. So I was playing around with like modular synthesizers and stuff in the mid 70s. And I've always sort of had an interest in pure electronic music, meaning there's no keyboard, there's just patch cables and boxes and circuits and stuff.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, I sort of, when I put out Distortion is Truth, I got back into that. That's why there's that weird sort of the synthesizer stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the work I do, like my day job, I do sound for television, but I do sound engineering for television.
Okay.
I do location sound. So, for instance, this morning, I was working for a large German network called ZDF, and we were outside the United Nations, and we were filming our great Donald Trump going by us in his limousine.
Oh, okay.
So, but normally I do more interesting stuff than that, and hopefully doesn't involve our so-called president. But so I make my living doing sort of what they called location sound. I work a lot for the Europeans and then, and people from the UK and stuff. But so that's sound engineering. I'm the guy with the long furry microphone on the end of the pole,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
I put lavaliers on people and stuff. So that's right now my life is divided between my musical endeavors and then basically what is my day job, which is doing sound engineering for television, which I actually very much enjoy.
Oh, okay.
I very much enjoy the work, and I meet the most famous people in the world and the most interesting people in the world. So it's a great job, actually.
So now you've also done music for. Besides that, you've done music like you were talking about with Susan Stenger, music for art installations,
Yeah,
productions. How
and
is it difficult to do?
it's not. I mean, I've done a lot of music for choreographers in the last 10 years, and similar thing, which is it takes me outside my own experience. It's a challenge. I have worked with some visual artists. There's an Austrian woman named Margaret Wibmer who lives in Amsterdam, but I've done some music for her installations. It's more about evoking a mood and sort of a sonic environment. And I
Okay.
like doing that kind of stuff. It's building stuff from the ground up, and it's not about sort of song form or chord progressions. It's much more like it's ambient music on a certain level.
Right.
It's creating a mood or an atmosphere, and I might use very primitive electronics, or I might use some very sophisticated digital processing, or I might combine the two. I might use guitars, I might not. I might, employ percussion. I have a piece for the choreographer Sally Gross where I have these wood blocks I'm banging, and then I have these Tibetan bowls I'm hitting, and
Oh, wow.
so I mean, I sort of branch out into sort of almost, far afield from guitar in any case.
Now, is that with stuff like that? Is that something that they'll give you an idea of what they want, or in the case of like a choreography, do you get a tape of the show, or do you go to see the show
Yeah,
before?
it's each choreographer I've worked with and I've worked with three different choreographers. It's been a little different, but sometimes people have just taken I've actually was told by one choreographer, hey, guess what? I hope you don't mind, but I've used one of your pieces for this dance.
Oh,
And
okay.
I was like, well, that's cool. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that. But then more typically, I work very closely with them. I come to rehearsals. I sort of see what's going on as the dance takes shape. And then I might bring a guitar or a bass. Sometimes I have like a bow, which I bow the bass. So it's like a cello.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I sort of work sort of in a give and take, trial and error with the choreographer and the dancers, and I sort of think, well, what would work with this? What's the mood? What am I trying to? What are they trying to get at? And so it's very collaborative, which is what I really like about it. And there's a lot of trial and error. Like sometimes I'll bring a piece of music that I think will be great, and it turns out that it's like not very good at all.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll bring something and it's kind of just perfect, but it's too fast or it's too slow or it's too low or it's too high.
Yeah.
So it's an organic process. But it is different than some choreographers where they get a piece of music and then they make a dance to it.
Okay.
In my the way I work is generally there's dance and I make music for it. Um, and usually in all of the work I've done, I perform live with the dancers along with some recorded bit of music.
Oh, okay.
Although occasionally it's just the live performance.
Ah.
Sometimes there's that one track on Frozen Flowers that is called "Time Frames Marking Time," and that's an excerpt of a piece, a live performance I did with the choreographer Sally Gross, and that's just me performing live with the dancers.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't realize that. That's fantastic. Now let's before we get into that, the new album, I have a question about Crossing Casco Bay.
Yeah,
That is a really interesting album, and
cool. I'm glad you like it. This
yeah,
one's not played so much, and there weren't as many copies pressed, so it's a little bit more obscure than the other one. Yeah,
it is. And unfortunately, I actually don't even have a copy. I've been having to stream it through YouTube to listen to it. And
well, I'll make you a CDR and send it to you, so at least you have that.
oh, that'd be perfect. That'd be perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
Now it's to me, I really enjoy that kind of the kind of music, but I like to sit down and listen to it. It's not. I don't like. To me, get I don't get to feel it if it's background in the music.
Yeah, and
And
that's it. That's cool. I mean, I appreciate that because that's the way I like to do it. I mean, that's um, because there's a lot of subtle things that happen, and if you sort of listen to it, you hear all these changes and things. Yeah,
yeah, I stuff like that. I kind of feel like it's. I need to listen to it with my headphones on, and
yeah,
so I can
yeah.
listen, so I can actually hear everything. And I kind of wonder if, and this is, I guess maybe this is just me wondering out loud, if music like that is getting lost in the way music is going now, with everything being streamable, downloadable,
Yeah,
and
you
everybody's got
know,
Spotify with one song, and it's
well, that's the thing. That's sort of my theory about contemporary music, which is this: every song now is a single
yeah,
because if people aren't energized by the song in the first 5 or 10 seconds, they move on.
exactly.
And that's really unfortunate because I know in my own personal experience and history of listening to music since I was a kid, what became some of my favorite records were records that I didn't necessarily automatically like when I first heard them, or music that it didn't grab me at first, but it was through listening to a few times it finally like clicked for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I do feel that, with the loss of the LP and the sort of the ability to sort of just instantaneously have music from all over the world at your fingertips. I mean, it's a fantastic thing on one level, but it's also it does mean that I think it what I'm trying to say is I think it leads to a shorter attention span.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
and I love the idea of really sitting down with it. That's why the LP was so great because it was like 20 minutes is a perfect amount of time. You have the first song on the first side and the last song on the first side, and then you turn the record over and it's like the second set.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so the first song on the second side was always really important. Like, how are they going to start this?
yeah.
And of course, you lose that with CDs. But more importantly, I do feel that kids, especially, everything has to be catchy right from the start.
Yeah,
You can't
exactly.
do a really slow build into something cool because a
Exactly.
lot of people will just move on and find something that's more viscerally exciting from the beginning.
And that's why one of the reasons I love Guitar Trio is the build.
Yeah, it builds. Yeah.
I love it. And the other thing that I feel gets lost so much now with digital music is cover art. One of the reasons I got
Yeah.
into Band of
Yeah.
Citizens was I'm a car nut. I love cars.
Oh, see, the Rambler Marlin.
The
Yeah.
Marlin and the Bonneville Salt Flat Racer, that Ford that you guys had
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
Now EP.
Yeah.
Both of
That's
those,
cool. Yeah.
yeah, the Now EP it's a striking cover. It is, to me, that artwork is absolutely brilliant,
That's
and
great.
I actually love the Rambler Marlin as a car itself. And so when I saw that a band had put it on the cover of their album and called the album "Here Comes Success," I said, "Holy shit! I've got to get this album. This is going to be fantastic."
That's great, and that artwork actually won some award or somewhere. But
I remember hearing that.
I always was obsessed with, my family drove Ramblers when we were young, and they were kind of like low budget cars.
Oh yeah.
And I always thought that like a Rambler sports car was sort of an oxymoron.
Yeah, exactly.
And I sort of, and the Rambler Marlin to me, because it was very similar to like the Barracuda and some of the other fastback cars.
Exactly.
But I just thought the Rambler Marlin was like the weirdest and coolest car. And I just decided like, the funny thing about, I'll tell you a little aside on that record, which is, it's obviously the inspiration is the Iggy Pop song Success, where the chorus is "Here Comes Success."
Right.
And so what we did is we put a car in the front and a rug on the back, which is "Here Comes Success, here comes my car, here comes my Chinese rug." Right?
Yeah.
And so I actually showed it to Iggy Pop once. I was in a studio and I said, "Oh, Jimmy, we have this this record, Here Comes Success, and it's got a car in the front and a rug in the back." And he thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
He just thought it was like so funny that someone would do that. But that was really fun.
That's awesome. And that's what really, it's funny because your last album is the first album to get me into the band. And
interesting.
It was because of the Marlin. There's a guy who's got a Marlin in his front yard down the road from me that's just rotting away.
Oh, cool.
It's
cool.
It's one of the cars that I've always wanted to get and kind of hot rod a little bit. But my dad he's been a car nut forever. He got me into it.
That's interesting. Yeah.
He always looks at me because I like the weird things, the Marlins, the AMXs and things like that. And he's like, what is wrong with you? Why do you like these orphans?
It is. They're sort of like the ugly ducklings. I also like these old Tatra, these Czech cars, the Tatra 603.
Yep.
With the 3 headlights and all that stuff. But you're right about the cover art, because the beauty, and this makes us sound like we're like really old curmudgeonly guys in our wheelchairs, But I mean, you used to have an LP and you just like hold it in your hands and you'd stare at it, and it was big, and maybe there were liner notes, or maybe there was, but it was like the art was really inspirational, and you would always associate the art with the music.
Yeah.
Like Baker's Banquet, it has this sort of sepia, beige and brown cover art. And when I hear that record, I'm kind of thinking those colors.
Yeah.
It's just, and a lot of that is lost now because, of course, it's the same thing. I have a Kindle and I read novels on it, and I never, after like a while, I don't know who the author is, what the title is, or because it's just a digital thing.
Yeah, it's just a digital page. You don't have the cover of the
You don't
book
have
in
the
front of
cover
you.
that reinforces the author's name and the title and the cover art and anything.
That's a really good point.
I do miss that. I do miss that element of the cover stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because artwork has just gone by the wayside, and unfortunately, because like you're exactly what you were saying. I would sit on my bed and read the liner notes, stare at the cover art, and there would be associations between the art and the music. And some of my favorite bands I found through reading the liner notes of other albums I was listening to.
Yeah.
So
that's
well. All right, so let's talk about the new album. I have one. The first thing I want to ask you, I have a question for you about, so a connection between Distortion is Truth and the new album, and I'm trying to find how I phrase this question here. Okay, here it is. I have a little list that I'm reading here, so
that's fine. Yes.
All right. On the end of "You Were Relentless" on Distortion is Truth, it's the same riff as "I've Got a Secret List."
Yes, you're the first person to mention that.
Oh, really?
You win. I don't know. You win
a CDR copy
or something.
A CDR copy of Crossing Casco Bay.
Yeah, you do. You win that. Yeah, I took the tag, the sort of riff at the end of "You Were Relentless," and made a new song out of it.
Okay, because that was going to be my question. Is that song that's sitting around, or did you just develop it into a song?
I decided that I liked that final riff that comes in at the end, and I kind of thought, okay, I'm going to make something new out of this.
Okay.
So it's sort of a continuation of the song into a new song. But yes, that's from the same, I added some tracks to it and everything else, but that riff is at the end of that one song on Distortion is Truth and sort of reemerges as a different song on Frozen Flowers. So that is fantastic that you picked up on that. I mean,
good.
it's apparent when you know about it, but it means you actually listen to the stuff, which I really appreciate.
Oh, well, I love the reason I wanted
Yeah.
have you on the show was because I love your music. So
Well, that's very nice.
Now, uh, okay, here's Sketch 72. I want to ask you about Sketch 72. We talked earlier
Yeah.
about your influence of the Rolling Stones. That is a very Stonesy sounding song.
Yeah, that was done very intentionally as kind of like a tribute to my vision of the sort of Keith Richard 5-string open tuning guitar song. And and I tried to not hide that at all. I called it Sketch 72 because it originally was just a sketch for a song.
Mm-hmm.
I never put lyrics on it or a melody. And 72 is because it's really like it dates from in my own mind, in my own musical memory. It could have been like from Exile on Main Street or something,
Right.
It's from that sort of Rolling Stones thing. So I just thought, wouldn't it be fun to do that? That's actually the last song that I recorded for the record. And the other thing that's really unusual about that is the drum part is from, and this would be fun. You can actually go back and figure this out. There's a song on Here Comes Success called Dirge. I think it's on Here Comes Success.
Yep.
And there's a long tag at the end, like an instrumental section.
Yes.
And what I did is I took the drum part from the instrumental section of Dirge, and because I have the multi-tracks all transferred into Pro Tools,
Okay.
I took just the drums, and I thought, I'm going to make a new song out of this drum part because I love playing with Ron Spitzer.
Mm-hmm.
But he can no longer drum. He had a stroke, and he's okay, but he can't drum anymore. And so what I did is I just took this drum part, spun it off, very active, drum part, and then I said I'm going to make a song. And then I said, well, why don't I do like a weird 5-string open tuning thing? And then why don't I play slide guitar, which I never play anymore, which I just love to play. So that was almost like a concept piece, but it was so much fun because here I am playing with Ron again, even though it's just on a recording, and I'm playing this sort of, and I have a very, in all modesty aside, I really understand this 5-string up and tuning stuff. Like I'm really pretty good at it. And I love playing it. I love playing it, and I love the subtle differences. Like if you listen with headphones, you hear the two guitar parts, and you hear these sort of subtle changes in accent. And so that was done purely for fun. I mean, I just thought this is really going to be fun, and why don't I put it on the record? So I did.
Well, I'm going to have to go back and listen. It's funny because I was listening to Here Comes Success today to kind of refresh a little bit, and I'll Elizabeth Stride, Hellbent, Dirge. Those are some of my
so
favorite songs.
If you listen to the end of the end of Dirge, there's like a break, and then it starts with the drum fill. You'll see if you play that back to back to Sketch 72, you'll immediately hear that it's the same drum part.
I'll do that
but
tomorrow
with
morning.
A totally different context, a totally different thing. And I'm going to do more of that. It's like I'm pirating my own stuff. I'm sort of cannibalizing it,
Well, you can do
but
that.
I can do that. Not only do I own all the rights, but I can do it because it's, my stuff. So what the hell?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Have you? All right. I wanted to ask you this because I was listening again to the album. Since I've got it, I've listened to it a lot, and I like the song "Partial Clearing."
Cool. Yeah.
To me, it sounds like this weird, and I don't know if this is an influence, and please tell me if it is because it sounds so cool. There's a Russian ghost radio station, UVB 76, and it's what they nobody really knows what in the hell it is. There's theories that it's like a dead hand station where if it just plays like monotone clips, like a 4-second clip, and then it repeats about 25 times a minute.
Wow. I'll have to look into this. I've never heard of this, I have to say, or at least I don't know about it.
Definitely check it out. But the theory is that there's two theories, and one is very doomsday-ish, and one is more probably closer to the truth. The one is that it's a dead hand station where if the signal cuts out for a specific period of time, it triggers a nuclear retaliation because the radio station sends a signal thinking that it's been knocked out and due to a nuclear attack. And because it's been broadcasting the same thing since the 80s or the early 90s.
Wow, that's so great.
And it's just tones. And every once in a while, and by once in a while I mean every few months, it'll cut for a second, and somebody will utter Russian names and numbers.
Really?
Yeah. It'll like Ivan, Troika, Anna, and then
that's so cool.
It's so creepy, but I can't stop listening to it. And the other is that it's a military station, and they just play this tone so that nobody else can claim that bandwidth.
That's frequency or something.
Yes. So that's probably more accurate.
I like that. I like both those concepts.
So after we're done, go check out UVB 76. And
UVB 76. Oh, cool. Okay, I will.
It's so weird because it kind of sounds like some of the droney avant-garde stuff that you do, and it's definitely partial clearing. Definitely sounds to me like it was maybe influenced by that, even though obviously now I know it wasn't. So
that's really great, though. But I'm happy to hear that it has those associations for you. That's very cool.
So you've done a lot of touring with Band of Susans, and I'm sure with Top Rocket and your other bands. You guys have played in some great locations, some legendary places. Like you played in like Max's Kansas City, CBGB's.
Yeah, CBGB, sure, yeah.
And I just had Richard Lloyd on a few weeks ago, and we were talking about how CBGB's grew and his part in it. Do you have any weird stories about touring, especially New York, going to London?
Wow, yeah. Let me think about it. I mean, we did do some really great. One of my favorite shows we ever played. We played in Denmark at the Roskilde Festival, and we played right after My Bloody Valentine. They played right before us, and we played right after them, and that was a great bill. And we played with them again at the old 930 Club in Washington. To me, that was a great bill. And the other, one of the great tours we did was first in the UK. It was Steve Albini's band Rape Man, Dinosaur Jr., and Band of Susan. So that was like massive guitar stuff.
No, wow. I don't live too far from the 930 Club. I'm about an hour and a half away from DC.
Yeah. We used to love to play there. The thing about touring that is sort of interesting is that certain cities were really great and certain cities were not so great. So like Atlanta was always a fantastic city for us. Now you would expect like Chicago and Boston, those are always great, because, and San Francisco was really good. Los Angeles was never really that good for us.
Really?
Amsterdam was not that great for us, but like Scandinavia, Denmark and Sweden, we used to play several cities in both countries. We had a fantastic following in Scandinavia.
That makes sense though, with all the weird music that comes out of there,
it does make sense. Yeah, it does make sense. And the funny thing is that at this concert I was at last night, there were filmmakers there, and they're doing a film about a composer named Ellen Fullman, Fullman, who's sort of a really cool composer who works with these very long strings. And this guy who was part of the film crew came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm a big Band of Susans fan. I saw you guys in Geneva, in Switzerland."
Oh, wow.
And I was remembering that, Switzerland, we did really well in Switzerland. I don't know. Man. I mean, I'm sure there are probably some very funny stories that don't involve me getting too drunk to remember what I'm doing. I mean, I'm sure there's some good anecdotes of touring, a flat tire out in Montana and, weird stuff going on. But I can't think of anything, although I would say that, we played in 12 foreign countries, and I think we played in almost every state in the U.S. except for Alaska and Hawaii. So it was fantastic. I mean, it was like sort of urban camping. I mean, we didn't have like a big bus and fancy hotels. We had van and people's floors. In Europe, we had hotels because that's the way it works. But so it was rough, and also in those days, one thing I will say is that when we were touring, it was before cell phones and before really the internet and before GPSs. So we had maps.
Oh yeah.
and handwritten directions, and we would have to stop at the phone booth to do like an interview with the Cleveland Plain dealer or something,
Oh wow.
stop at the truck stop. And also, when you're in Europe, you're looking at these maps and the street names change every block, of course.
Yeah.
And, and so, now I would think, God, it'd be so easy now. You just put it into Google and you have a GPS and you
Yeah.
can call people on the phone. But those days it was like, we've got to find a phone booth,
Yeah. It was more adventurous.
and we've got to do a call into a radio station, and where's the phone booth and where's the map, and
Who's got
these
change?
and these directions are wrong, and who has change. I know. Yeah. So anyhow, it was very primitive by today's standards, but it was an experience.
Are there
Sort of
any?
like it was sort of like being Lewis and Clark,
Oh,
sort of.
yeah. I can imagine that, just going out into the great
Into
unknown
the
for you guys.
uncharted wilderness. Yeah.
So, do you have any live Band of Susans that might get released in the future?
There's a bunch of stuff on YouTube. There's a cool gig from Hamburg, Germany, from either '91. I think it's from '91. If you go to YouTube and you search like Band of Susans live, there's a CBGB show. There's generally the sound isn't super great,
Yeah.
and either is the video for that matter. It was fairly primitive, but that's the best way to find. I don't, there's a lot of people that have cassettes of us, and people write to me and they send me stuff, and very often the monitors weren't great, and so the vocals are like aren't so great. We're singing really flat or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in, or we can't hear ourselves at all, so who knows what's going on. But because we would always overpower the monitors and stuff. We use big amps and playing loud. But there's a couple of videos that are actually worth seeing, I think. I do have some live stuff that I think about doing with something with it at this point. I had a lot of stuff on cassettes, and I finally had it digitized. So
Okay.
I have all these like CDs of, not only I have all the Band of Susans demos, the 4-track demos that I did for the band, which are quite interesting if you're really interested in the band, because you can see the original version of the song as I recorded it, and then you can see how it became when the band recorded it. So,
that's the stuff I love.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever put something out, but what I might do is I might just dump a bunch of it on something like Bandcamp or something, so people can access it.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Which would probably be the way to do it. For the people that are really the fans of this. Because I've always liked it. I've always liked hearing, some Pete Townsend home demo before the Who recorded it or whatever.
Oh, I've got a ton of Jimmy Page stuff before Led Zeppelin recorded stuff. And
exactly. To me, that's really fascinating. So maybe someone's interested in that. I'll see. I may put something out.
Well, I'm definitely interested in it because I love hearing how stuff progresses.
Yeah, that's cool.
Did you have to ever... I always hear about, and you produced all the Band of Susans albums. So did you ever have to do anything really weird to get the sound you wanted? I've spoken with a few producers for this show, and I've heard stories about making singers run around the studio 6 or 7 times to get them out of breath to get the sound that they want.
Yeah, we usually used vodka for that.
Oh, there you go.
But I think the thing we did that was a little weird is I would sometimes select microphones that were like the wrong microphone. I would say, like, let's use this. And the engineer, who knew a lot more about this stuff than I did, would say, why do you want to use that? No, just use it. And it actually worked. It actually generally worked. I know a lot more about production and engineering now than I did then. And I actually wish I knew then what I know now. I would be the first to admit I made some mistakes in production, and there were certain problems that I thought could not be solved, and actually, with the information I have now, I could have solved it very easily. But that was part of the whole thing. A lot of those Band of Susans records sound like you're sitting in a room, like with your head in front of the guitar amp, and that's all right. That's sort of the way it is.
Well, that's what I was looking for, especially back then.
Exactly.
That's the sound I wanted.
Exactly. So,
so where can everybody find the new album? Where can they follow you on social media?
Well, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram under my own name.
Okay.
On Facebook, there's a Band of Susans site, and there's also Trace Elements Records, which is the label. Woo, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, that was an interesting sound effect I just heard.
It sounded like I heard a little tinkle, but that's all I got on my end.
Yeah. Oh, cool. That's great. Okay. Um, and also, I have a website which is robertposs.com,
Okay.
which has different sections. There's a section for Band of Susans. There's a section for my solo work. There's even a section for the sound work I do for television.
Oh, cool.
So, I'm in terms of acquiring the music, there's Bandcamp, there's CD Baby, and then Amazon has downloads. I think Apple has it. I have a deal with a digital aggregator, which is a fancy way of saying that, they distribute it to all the streaming sites and all the download sites. And so it shouldn't, if you search under my name or you search under Frozen Flowers Curse the Day, it shouldn't be difficult to find. And as I said, Bandcamp and CD Baby are very accessible. And some of the Band of Susans back catalog, a lot of it is out of print, but there is sort of a store section on my website. And what I do for people, for the stuff that's out of print, I'm willing to make them CDRs and send them like PDFs of the artwork and stuff for a very small price.
That's wonderful.
Just because my interest is in getting this stuff out there. So, and there's a lot of people that, want this stuff. But most of the Band of Susan stuff as well, or a good part of it is available through downloads. If you go to Amazon or you go to Apple or whatever, if you search around, you can find the stuff.
Okay.
And there's even people on eBay selling records for like exorbitant prices too, which is always sort of funny. But
yeah. Well, Robert, thank you so much for coming on with me tonight. I really do appreciate it.
Great.
And if you just hang up for 1 second. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, drop me a line at my email, which is robertposs at robertposs.com.
Okay.
With your postal mailing address and your email address, and I'll get you some cool stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And if you just hang on for 1 second, if you would.
Oh, I can do that. Yeah. And this is called performance anxiety?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And you can do it however you want. Just
sure.
Name. You can say Band of Susans if you want. If you don't, it's up to you. All right. I am all set.
And should I say you're listening to or not, or
yeah?
Okay.
That'd be great.
All right. You ready for me?
I'm all set.
Hi, this is Robert Poss from the Band of Susans of several years ago. I have a new solo record out called Frozen Flowers Curse the Day, and you're listening to Performance Anxiety.
Excellent.
That work for you?
That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was lovely to talk to you.
Oh, same to you, Robert. I really do appreciate your time. And it'll take a little bit of time for this to get out. I've got a backlog of stuff.
And of course, yeah.
And I just release one a week. But as soon as it is available, I will let you and Howard know, and you guys can let me know what you think.
Very good. Thanks so much.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.